Ash is directed by Flying Lotus of is it Kuso fame, and they've done a bunch of other things too. If you know what Flying Lotus is, you know what Flying Lotus is. You can look it up. This is a sci-fi movie. It stars Eiza Gonzalez and Aaron Paul. Those are your two biggest names. Eiza, I don't know if I say her name right. She's been in a bunch of things. It's one of those faces you see and you go like, I know this person. I've seen her before, and then you kind of can't remember who it was. That's how it works for me at least. And of course, Aaron Paul, Breaking Bad. What do we got to say? We know Aaron Paul. And this is a movie that is you've seen versions of this before. I would say Event Horizon. And it's kind of a little bit like Dead Space. It's this kind of space horror, very colorful. I mean, to me, I think when started watching it, I was like, oh boy, they've definitely seen Planet of the Vampires by Mario Bava, but they probably haven't. I'm probably the only person. Well, I'm not the only person, but there aren't many people younger than probably 50 that will bring up Planet of the Vampires by Mario Bava, but which is one of my favorite crazy B sci-fi movies of ever time all over the world. It's just so weird and I'd low budget and colorful and beautiful in all the ways that I love Bava. Does it make any sense? No. Is the plot ridiculous? Yes. Preposterous. Anyway, why am I talking about Planet of the Vampires? Well, because all those movies I mentioned are better than Ash, but Ash has a few things to offer. You get Raya. She wakes up bloodied and beaten in a space station that's on its last legs. And as she wakes up, she has flashbacks of crew members dying and bloodied. And as she wanders through the, flickering, barely going space station, she discovers the bodies of all of her crewmates that have all been murdered. And then the movie is like one of those what happened to the crew and how did we get here kind of movies. And through flashbacks and other encounters, she and we piece together the events that led to basically everyone getting killed. Does that sound very original? No. Is it very original? No. Is it trying to do it with a lot of flair? Yes. This movie is really trying to give you a beautiful, colorful, psychedelic ish version of space and of the space station and of the planet. And I do appreciate that. I don't know if you remember a little movie from a few years back that was on Shudder. It was a kind of a three-part miniseries, but really together it ended up being about like one movie length called Blood Machines. I really enjoyed that quite a bit. And that had a similarly psychedelic, very CGI kind of created colorful future look. This kind of has a similar thing here where most of the movie is just kind of a murder mystery essentially on a space station or it's actually the thing is the landing craft that on the planet below the space station. So we're really on the on the planet in that landing craft kind of a thing. And you go out onto the planet a little bit, but not as much as I would have liked. I would have liked a lot more exploration here. I think where this movie does work well is it works well in just kind of giving you an interesting like production design. There's a whole thing with this. There's a whole thing here about a surgery robot, and I love the design of the surgery robot and kind of how it works. And it has this kind of it has a Japanese kind of sing-songy, almost like, "Hey, welcome to." Doesn't say it in English, right? It's in Japanese. It's almost, but it feels like it's like, "Hey, welcome to Robot Surgeon. We're here to help you. What do you want?" That kind of has that kind of tone to it. And but the thing is, one of the most vicious, horrific looking things you've ever seen when it actually gets working. And I think the use of that throughout the movie is fantastic. And just things like when it diagnoses you and then it has like little cartoon things that pop up to show you, you're dead or whatever. I thought that was pretty great. And little touches like that I think were fantastic. And I kind of wish the movie had more, which is more like just world building. And I know that that's kind of a cliche these days. Like, I love the world building in this movie or this series, but I kind of wish it did do more of that because where it did do it, it was interesting. The character stuff was not interesting. The story was not interesting because it was very derivative, as I've already mentioned, and it also really didn't surprise. And I think this wants to be a mystery where the reveals at the end blow you away, like, oh my gosh, that's what's really happening. But it kind of didn't. It kind of like, well, I kind of saw that coming. And I asked myself towards the end of this movie as I was watching it, because like I said before, you kind of start near the end and then it's mostly flashing back and forth. And I asked myself, does that help this movie? And I think it doesn't. I think it hurts this movie. I think this movie, if it would have not had that flashbacky kind of format, if it would have just started with them getting there and all of these events that we saw, if those went chronologically, I think it would have been much more engaging because you wouldn't have known where this movie was going to go. And then it would have got to where it got anyway in this movie. And I think it would have been a more satisfying experience throughout. I think literally just recutting this movie in more of a chronological order would make this movie at least a star or star and a half better in my book. As a lead performance, it's fine. I think that she doesn't have to carry this movie. It's really a plot movie and a setting movie. I will give this movie credit. I kind of was out a lot of this movie, but it did deliver some pretty good gore and it did deliver some pretty good gooey kind of, I want to say they're monster effects exactly, because I'm not going to say exactly what happens in the last part of this movie, but the last act of this movie does give you some of the things you want in a space horror movie, and I think it did a pretty good job of it. But it was just the plot that kind of let this down. It wasn't, like I said, once again, it wasn't the effects and it wasn't the production. All that stuff for its budget was pretty darn great. And the direction was fine. Flying Lotus was fine as far as that goes. Oh, except Flying Lotus also wrote the music, and the music is horrible in this music movie. The music makes this movie seem cheaper. If this had an Atticus Ross, um, Trent Reznor score, it would be like so much better. So sorry, Flying Lotus. Stick to the directing and not the music writing. In my opinion, someone else might totally disagree. I'm gonna have to go 2.5 stars in this. I can't recommend it because it ultimately was not satisfying enough. Like I said, if it had just been flipped around chronologically, I probably would recommend this, and I won't now just because of the way it was put together. So 2.5 stars for this movie.